All right, welcome everyone. I am really excited to be sitting down today with my friend and colleague, Emilie Kershaw. Emilie is a recent graduate of the Trauma Energetics Coach Certification Program, and I asked her to join me to just have a nice conversation. I love to hear the background around how people came to this kind of work, and and also like how you're using it now. But my first question is just I would like to hear a little bit about you and what drew you into this unique work that we call either transpersonal energy healing or the trauma energetics coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also love to hear people's stories too and how they're drawn to this program, just because then we can see this that it's designed for everybody, right? No
Mhm.
matter where you began or what you've been through, this is for everyone's healing journey. And I think for me, looking back, I've always been an energetically sensitive person. um, I've been called sensitive my whole life. And for a time, being called sensitive felt kind of like a criticism or an offense to me for a long time as a child growing up. And it wasn't until honestly my early 30s, decades later, that I realized that's my superpower. I
Mhm.
am sensitive. I am, attuned to other people's energies. And so I wanted to start delving into that sensitivity more because it was part of who I am. I wasn't going to wash it off or rub it off myself. And so, what was about this that made me who I am? And maybe eventually, how could I use it to offer something to others as well? And so, I dove deep into energy work, self-healing practices. And so really what drew me to this program was getting to know myself on a deeper level, and continuing the healing practice and knowing how to then help and serve others along the way, because it's a passion of mine, it's an interest of mine. And also I want to work with people who may have experienced life in the way that I did growing up. And I want them to have more tools and resources than I did as well. And now, we're always on our healing path. And what I went through to get to where I am now was meant to be. It was meant to
Mhm.
be part of my experience. Um, but I've always been someone who is very connected to nature as well, and can really connect with others on a deeper level. I'm not going to have a surface conversation with you. You know, I am someone who's going to get deep with you, hold space for you, and I'm passionate about asking really big self-reflective questions to help you get to know yourself better.
Were you
And
always like that, Emilie? Like even as a child?
always, always, I was always that friend growing up who you would call to be like, okay, what do we do in this situation? What do I say? And I had a lot of adults always tell me like, that's a very, mature question you've just asked. Uh,
Mhm.
so I think I've always kind of had this mindset and way of thinking about things that are eager and desiring to know things at just a much more interconnected level,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, what's underneath the surface of everything. So
Yeah. I'm so curious, like, how did that transformation happen for you to go from, oh, I'm a sensitive person and it's hard or challenging or, maybe looked upon as not so good, to transform that internally and say, actually, this is my superpower. And now I know how
yeah.
you're using that so beautifully with your clients now. But tell me about your personal transition from the, oh, this is hard to this is my power.
Ooh, I love that question. That's so nice. Yeah. Um, I think that um that transition, I would say that a lot of that came from my merging pattern that I've
Mm,
always had. And I think there was a long time in my life where I was looking to relationships to help me heal, looking to other people to help heal me,
mm,
and forming codependent relationships, forming, that kind of would lead to unhealthy dynamics. And so, a lot of times in those situations, that was the feedback I was receiving is you're just too sensitive. That was always the solution. You have to kind of
just
move,
don't be so sensitive, Emily. Come on, don't be
just
so
just
sensitive.
get over it, right? Um, and to be honest with you, what had to happen is I had to be alone. I had to be alone for a good 3 years of my life. And during that time, I did a lot of solo travel. I went abroad and traveled on my own, and I had my own apartment. And that was very different than my merging pattern dynamic, which was always to seek out co-regulation with others and to seek out validation and approval from others. Because what I was missing out on was listening to my own intuition,
Mm,
being, cultivating my own self-awareness of what do you really want? What's unique about you? What do you bring to the table?
mm,
Um, and so being alone allowed me to, it was a lot of effort and work because it was going against my survival pattern,
mhm,
but it allowed me to really listen and hold space for myself and to start to unravel old patterns and old ways of being. So then I could start to show up in my full power, that I could
mhm.
start to connect to my essential self. And I started seeing a shift with how people treated me and how people interacted with me. Because now people were starting to compliment me on, wow, you're so intuitive. Wow, you're such a great listener. Wow, I feel so calm around you, right? Which are
Mm.
also aspects and characteristics of someone who is sensitive. But instead of hearing the criticism of it, which was part of the energy I was putting out there, right?
Mhm.
Um, I was now shifting into this place where people were reflecting back the strengths that came from that sensitivity. And I,
Right. So you healed the defense and you were able to move into embracing those gifts.
yes, yes. And in that, the world started to reflect back to me something very different. And that started to
Mm,
get me excited because I was like, oh, I must be doing something here, something different. And with that, I started to move and become more confident in like, okay, this is my way forward. I'm
mm.
showing up authentically and I'm allowing myself to be who I am, but in my power, right? If I'm showing up with sensitivity disconnected from my essential self, I'm showing up in that merging pattern.
In the
That,
defense.
yes, in the defense. So
Mhm.
that was that a big transition for me, that helped me rewire that.
Mhm. Oh, so now you are a coach and you
Yes.
help other people with this huge transformative experience. So tell me a little
Yes.
bit more about you and
Yeah.
your
So
work now.
my private coaching practice is called transformative coaching, and I call it that because I really do believe that these methods, and practices that we're learning in the Somagetics program are transformational. And what I mean by that is that they are lasting, right? Like it is not a temporary fix to something. It's something where we dig down to the roots, to the base, to be able to see where we began, where we started from, and how we built up from there. And so, I believe in taking that time to really dig all the way down to those roots to be transformative in that way, to have everlasting change in your life. And I think a lot of times, especially in the culture and society we live in, where it's like, okay, I want to feel better tomorrow and I want this to go away now, which I completely understand. It's uncomfortable to sit in that sometimes. And a lot of us are already so overwhelmed with obligations and tasks and expectations that it feels like a big insurmountable task as well, to take on our own emotions and untangling trauma we have. But that's what I help people do. And that's what I guide people through. And I think, just like we work on in the program, being able to sit in that discomfort is part of the process, knowing and trusting that we're playing the long game here, right? We're looking at the entirety of our lives, of when we are 85 90 years old, and recognizing that we are fully free and that we can enjoy life, and we don't have to continue to be stuck in these patterns. And so a lot of the people I've attracted into my coaching practice right now are people who I find are desperate to relearn how to feel again. And I know it sounds a little weird to say that, but a lot of us have been operating from the mind so often, and that's what's required from us a lot of times. In many jobs, we are not seen as very productive if we are not operating from the mind continuously. But if we stay here and don't find this balance between mind and heart, or mind and sensate level, then we start to slowly, unconsciously in many ways, disconnect from many different aspects of self, until if I asked you, how do you feel about that? You may not even know the answer anymore, because you're so far removed from what you're actually experiencing on a feeling level.
Mhm.
So I'm bringing people back around to be able to have that heart-mind balance more, to be able to feel grounded in their daily lives, and especially to be able to tap into your inner voice. And that's a big thing for me, is trusting our intuition. And I work with a lot of females, especially on this, in terms of decision making, and standing their ground on what is true for them, and setting boundaries around that. And I think that can be a challenging task for many women, including myself. I had to learn how to do that and reconnect with the inner voice. We are all intuitive, and so it's just practicing that muscle again and relearning what's already been there, but we just have forgotten over time.
Yeah, and especially people in that codependent merging pattern, right? We're so aligned and attuned to other people's feelings that we often don't know what is us versus what is them.
So true. Yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yes. And I think that's when you start to confuse, like, is this the voice of my merging pattern that's coming through, of wanting to please, wanting to keep the peace, right? Or is
Mhm.
this the voice of my intuition? So I start
Mhm.
to get tools to recognize that, because it's subtle. It's not intuition and the sensate body. It's not going to be loud. It's subtle energy. And so we have to learn how to quiet the mind and slow down to be able to access that and connect with it more.
Mm. Yeah, and in my experience, it's really helpful to have somebody show you how to do it, give you feedback, give you some different options and tools to do it and practice with. You gotta
Yes.
practice it.
And it's so amazing how many of my clients say, oh my gosh, it's right there. It's right under the surface. And I'm like, yes, it's true. And so when I ask some of those self-reflective questions, or I just reflect back, right, what I've heard them say, or what they're demonstrating to me through their body language, it starts to click and they start to slowly connect with it again. Um,
Mm.
so for all of us, it's right there under the surface, and it doesn't feel so overwhelming sometimes when we have someone else to hold that space and to guide us through and to be that grounded energy for us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I'm curious now about is what about the transpersonal energy healing somagetics program drew you in? Like, what was it about this particular method that brought you to where you're at now?
Yeah. So I've always had a deep spiritual practice myself, and so I was very interested in how the program brought that spiritual aspect in. And when I say spiritual, I mean, really believing in the energetics of how we operate, and the energetics of our interpersonal relationships and how we relate to our trauma as well. Because that's how I operate, and that's how I navigate the world around me, is very energetically on a sensate level. I feel through this world. That's me, and I realize that's not everybody, but that's a big part of who I am. And so that was a big draw for me because that resonated with me at such a deep level. um, and the program gave me to be permission to be who I am. And it's kind of like astrology to me, where you kind of learn about yourself a little bit through your signs, and you realize, oh, wow, like it's okay. This makes sense to be myself. It makes sense to feel my way through this world. That's okay. That's appropriate. Um, and so that was another thing that really drew me in, and wanted to learn more about. And I think also just the community that's created through a program like this, where you're working with 25, 27 different students together, all healing personally together, all learning how to help others heal together. Such an important piece that I didn't realize before I started the program. I've always been one to heal alone,
Mm.
honestly. And maybe that's something that I learned in childhood, right? If you're told you're too sensitive, you kind of want to hide that away from others. Um, and so I realized that that was a missing part of my journey, was being in community with others, and sharing vulnerably what my path was, and how I viewed things. Because to be seen like that on that deep level is very transformational. And it gives you confidence to put yourself out there as you are. This is not about getting healed and
Mm.
then showing up, right? Because that's being healed is not a destination, right? Like, we're just going through this process of untangling for our whole lives. We are here as students of life. And so, but I think being able to show up with whatever you're experiencing, whatever you have on your plate, wherever you are on your path, and being accepted in that way, and realizing there's nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. Right? Like,
Mhm.
you're here to learn, you're here to experience, you're here to feel. And so, you know what? You're doing just fine. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Mhm. Well, one of my favorite things, you might be able to relate because I know that you have a background in teaching also. One of my favorite things about being the director of this program is watching how the students take this work and make it their own, how
Yeah.
they use the work in other work that they do, other methods that they have, other styles of support and healing, and make it like their own unique thing. So before we go, I would really love to hear a little bit about how you use this work in your own unique way.
Sure. Yeah. So you're right. I have a teaching background. I was a Montessori teacher for 13 years. And it was interesting. I transitioned out of the classroom about 2 years ago now, officially. And I always thought to myself that, like, okay, that part of my life is closing. That chapter is over. And now I'm moving into healing work, coaching work. And so I had kept them separate for a while.
Mm.
And then through this program, and through having like different experiences in classroom, whether that just be support or training, not necessarily as a lead teacher, I started to realize that these really made sense combined and connected, my Montessori teaching experience and also this coaching foundation I have now. And so what I'm offering now, I'm calling it Montessori Development Consulting. And what I'm doing is I'm bringing these tools from Somagetics coaching program into the classroom. I am specifically focused on helping and assisting teachers um, with self-regulation, which means like being able to regulate their nervous system on a daily basis. Because when we walk into that classroom, our energy creates and sets the tone for the day. And you have all these very open, sensitive beings in your room, sometimes 30 at a time, and they will start to attune themselves to your energy, right? What is that word I'm looking for where you're the dominant energy and everything is attuning to you? There's a word for that, and I forgot it. But let me know if you remember it. But
Yeah.
I think it's very important to have that awareness as a teacher in the classroom, um, and to be able to have connection to your heart center during the day, leading from the heart. And I think
And doing it purposefully, right?
yes,
Like doing it on with intention, on purpose, setting the tone that you need to set that day
yes,
with your students or with your whoever it is that you're with, in this case with your kids,
yeah,
right? But to be able to have the capacity to stay regulated and choose how you show up.
yes, yeah, and learn how to ground yourself throughout the day in the classroom, finding opportunities, connection, pockets of time where you can check in with yourself. Where am I right now with my breathing? What am I feeling in my body? And also, even asking yourself, what am I triggered by in the classroom, right? There may be some personalities that you're triggered by more than others. And it's good to self reflect and ask yourself, why am I triggered by this specific type of behavior more than this behavior? And it could be a key and a mirror into your own trauma or childhood experience that may be good for you to start to unravel or dig into a little bit, so you can show up with a more awareness and an objective perspective to what's happening around you, right? And not have these biases in relationship with the kids you're working with. And I've always worked in a co-teaching environment. So it's funny how it's always worked out where a certain type of behavior really triggers me, but doesn't trigger my co-teacher, and vice versa. So we would
Mm.
always swap with certain kids, but also know that this is my work, right? It's not about me changing the child or changing the person in front of me. This is my own personal healing journey that's showing up for me right now. And that's the amazing thing about being a teacher, I believe, is that teaching forces you to have such a journey of personal and spiritual development,
Mhm.
right? If you allow it, if you're open to it,
Yeah.
because you've got all these kids who are going to be mirrors to you on a daily basis. Right?
Yeah. And so this work can give you a whole nother set of tools from a whole different perspective, right? From that energetic and nervous system perspective on how you can show up for yourself and show up for your kids or your, whoever it is that you're working with. It's just a very different perspective. So I love that you're using this, the way that you're using this to support other teachers, specifically in the Montessori world. Huh?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it's such an important thing moving forward as we start to also hopefully transform our educational systems eventually, where the curriculum is important, but also development of the self, um, especially for children that age group of 0 to 6, where they're such sponges and learn so much about what it means to be a human being in this world. Where can we create safe spaces for children um, to learn and expand their essential selves, right? Instead of having systems and obligations that start to dampen that and put them in boxes. And so that's a big passion of mine, and I love working with teachers who are also open to that creative way of doing things, which the Montessori classroom, of course, allows for. So I'm very excited about it. And yeah, moving forward with it, I think as I go along, I'll continue to learn how this work continues to relate to Montessori classroom and my experience as a teacher.
Mm.
Yeah, just letting it unfold and show me itself.
Wonderful. Well, it was really fun to hear your transformation, and from, really like being a sensitive being was a hindrance, and now it is your superpower. And because of that sensitivity, though, and that being your superpower, you can bring that in to the career that you had, and you have a new career as a coach as well. All right. So I love hearing the different ways that people are using this work. And my last question for you is, what is your most favorite or useful energy exercise or activity that helps you really stay inside of your essential self?
Okay. Yeah. I have so many of them. Can I offer two?
Yeah, sure.
So for me, I have such a connection with nature, and this is a simple, easy one where wherever you are, even if you have just a city park nearby, hopefully there's a tree there. And what I do is I literally tree hug and put my arms around the tree and just take a few deep breaths in. And trees are so grounding. And if you're open to it and allow it, and you let go of the judgment of how silly you might look or what this actually means, just allow the tree's energy to guide you, and I'll start releasing whatever is not needed, that kind of static energy that's on the outer skirts of our energy bubble. And just start to ground down like the roots of a tree. That's a really quick one. It's kind of like earthing,
Mm-hmm.
where it just like rebalances you. Another one I do pretty often is I lay down on the floor, back on the floor, and I just kind of tune into the body. Where are we at? How are we feeling? And I give myself permission and space to just start moving intuitively. So that may look different every day. And that's totally fine, because the body might need something slightly different each day in what it's releasing and in how it's unwinding itself. And you'll find that if you get out of the way, which means out of your mental mind into the sensate body, your body will start to just guide you and move you how it wants to use the space and unwind itself. And that will help me release pockets of emotion. And when I say pockets, I feel them sometimes stuck in areas of the body or stored there that need movement and release. And as I release that, I find I gain a lot of clarity. So maybe I'll have like just an intuitive or inspired thought come to the surface because now that's out of the way, whatever needed to be released. And what's opening space to is my essential self that's coming through with an idea or a way to move forward with things. Now, I do this pretty often because I believe that if you are a feeling being and someone who's sensitive, it's really important to be have that part of your routine and your regimen is just allowing time to clear and move whatever wants to be released. And that can look so many different ways, right? I think people sometimes get stuck in like the how, but don't realize there's so many different avenues and vehicles for us to get back in touch with our essential self.
But the to take the time to pay attention, to slow down and
Mm,
just pay attention. What is here? What's here now? What's
yeah,
happening in my body? What's my breath like?
yeah,
Like your body knows what to do if you slow down and let it.
it's very intelligent.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me today, Emily. I'm always so inspired from our graduates and colleagues on, how they got here, what was the draw for them into this work, and now how they're using it in their own unique and beautiful ways. So I will be sure to put Emily's contact information in the description box of this video or podcast. So if you are interested in learning more about Emily's work, I will make sure her contact information is there. And as always, you can learn more about the Somagetics Trauma Energetics Coach Certification Program at our website, and all that information will be below. So thank you again for spending the time with
Thank
me
you.
today, Emily. And oh, and also Emily is currently on our teaching team. So she has been a beautiful addition to the team as we grow and need more support in guiding our students. So I'm so thrilled to have you associated with not just as a graduate, but as part of our team. So thank you for being here today, Emily, and I wish you luck in your new coaching business.
Thank you.